he went too far in his ignorance. I think he is not aware of what Islam is and what Islam stands for. I think he needs to be educated on Islam, and he needs to be told that as far as political Islam is concerned, it is well established in the Quran. In chapter 24, verse 55, وَعَلَى اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَيَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُم فِي الْأَرْضِ. It is a promise of Allah to those who believe among you and do righteous deeds, that you will be given succession over the present rulers in the land. If that's the case, this is the political succession, not spiritual succession. The Quran is directly referring to politics of Islam. So I think media should go back to people who have a balanced view of Islam, instead of taking one bigot from the street and putting the mic in front of him and focusing on his face so that you can count every single hair on his face. Because you see, if you have a crowd of people and you have people coming from different backgrounds, and if you put a 12-inch lens on the face of one person, all your screen will show you will be one person, right? One face. And you will assume that there is no one around, but there are other people around. So I think media deliberately, quite deliberately, chooses these people. And we have to make that change. And you quite rightly pointed out that we should go to these means such as Facebook and Twitter and use it to our advantage and spread the message, and so that the media can take some balanced Muslim into consideration.
But the Prime Minister has exactly the same problem as you're describing.
Right.
He is distorted, he is misrepresented, his words are taken out of context.
Sure.
You're in the same boat with him. What he's asking for is that we finish this system of apartheid, separate development, which the government encouraged from the 1970s.
Sure.
And we become one people.
Right. That's a very good point.
This is his point.
Okay.
And when he uses his phrase muscular liberalism, his inspiration is coming from the 19th century phrase muscular Christianity.
Right.
But he chooses not to say that because he wants to include everybody.
Sure.
He wants apartheid to finish because he is the generation which defeated apartheid in South Africa. Right. And now he wants to defeat it here.
Okay,
he is misrepresented all the time, just as you are.
You see, apartheid in South Africa was founded upon racial values. Okay, whites against blacks. I am not too sure whether it was religious in nature.
The laws were very religious.
Okay.
But
hey, the Prime Minister used the term that...
No, it came into it.
Yeah, well, they just happen to be Christian, but it was nothing to do.
Excuse me, sir. If we just allow the speaker to speak first, and then you're free to put up your hands there, please.
My problem is when the Prime Minister said that people who believe in political Islam are extremists, and these are the people we need to focus on, and they are a threat in Europe. And he's speaking to the European leaders. This is not a domestic speech. This is an international speech delivered in the presence of some of the top people in Europe. And he's telling them that people who believe in the political dimensions of Islam are extremists. This is a very dangerous statement, and it cannot be taken out of context because he made it very clear. Those people who believe in political Islam. What is political Islam? The concept of Khilafah, the concept of Caliphate. He made it very clear, by the way.
It wasn't very clear because he was using a euphemism.
Right.
Whatever phrase they use, what they're talking about is 7-7, right?
Right.
That's what they're talking about. Now they cannot come to a comfortable phrase to describe that. They keep changing the phrase. Whatever phrase they use, it's wrong. Now what phrase would you like the Prime Minister to use to describe the forces behind 7-7?
That's a very good point. Okay.
What phrase could you use to encapsulate that, which is what he was talking about? It's a conscience on security, not on religion.
That's a good point, but I find it quite ironic that the Prime Minister couldn't find any other security issues in Europe. We have 167 rapes taking place in...
Sorry, what phrase would you prefer him to use? Because I'm sure if you wrote to him and said, I would rather use this phrase than that phrase, you would consider it.
Okay, I cannot simply rephrase the entire 20-minute speech.
Just this
it's
phrase,
impossible.
political Islam.
Right.
What phrase would you prefer him to use? I'm sure if you wrote to him and said, this is offensive, it's misleading, it's upsetting, we would prefer you to use such and such a phrase.
Okay, so it is very easy for him to use a phrase such as terrorist factor within Islam, because there are terrorists to be found among the Christians, among the Buddhists, and even among the Jews. Okay, we have terrorists in all religions, right? So all he had to say was the terrorist element within the house of Islam. This is the problem, rather than saying the political dimensions of Islam, because we all believe in the political Islam or the political dimensions of Islam. So this was, I think, Prime Minister is a responsible man. Okay,
and a listening man.
Yes, but the problem is he, I think, went too far in this case, and he didn't do enough research. If he carried out enough research, he would have realized that the Muslims do believe in equality of women with men when it comes to spirituality, because no man or no scientist will ever tell you that biologically or physically men and women are equal. It doesn't exist. Men and women are biologically not equal. Spiritually in Islam, they are both equal. There is equal reward and punishment for women and men in Islam. So the Prime Minister, I think he should have done a bit more research instead of using it, because what he did was he actually gave ammunition to EDL. On the same day, EDL did a demonstration in Luton, and they stated that Prime Minister is saying exactly what we're saying. We don't want political Islam. We don't want political. Tony Blair, when he was the Prime Minister, let me finish. Tony Blair, when he was the Prime Minister, he used this term caliphate. That these people, the ones we're talking about, they want a caliphate, a global caliphate. Okay? Now this was very, very specific and precise. This is what the European leaders mean when they talk about political Islam. The concept of caliphate is in the Quran. If you don't believe me, open the Quran, chapter 24, verse 55. So, do these leaders want us to abandon a part of our religion? Is that what they want? It's not going to happen. It is not going to happen. So what they should be doing, I think they are misled and they have been mistaught. So what they need to do, they need to go back to the Muslims, scholars, to be more precise, and ask them what Islam is and what Islam is not, so that we can, when we do our speeches, we can do them accurately and represent the Muslims properly, rather than making sweeping statements and including all Muslims as extremists. So I think if Tony Blair said caliphate, then it is a point to be taken.
Thank you. Sir, you raised your hand earlier on. Do you still have a point that you would like to make? Or? And then we have a question at the back there.
Oh, there wasn't a question. It was actually just a comment in terms of the terms that are being used. Extremism, the word extremism and extremists are used very loosely, and I'd just like to add that. And I think there's a big difference between people who are Muslims that call political Islam and extremists. Extremists is associated with those that are carrying out terror threats of bombings. And I think there's unfortunately what Prime Minister is doing. He's meant to be responsible. He's meant to be our Prime Minister of Britain. He's using the terms very loosely, and I think that's dangerous, because in the minds of the public, anybody who's calling for political Islam in the Muslim world is suddenly seen as an extremist, whereas that Muslim will never ever call for any violence whatsoever. So it's very important. I think the lady is right that the terms do need to be distinguished, but I think we also need to realise how the words are too loose at the moment, and the government officials and MPs are using it too loosely. They need to take a responsible line in differentiating between these terms.
But if the word caliphate is used by someone, such a person is deemed to be an extremist. And caliphate, the concept of caliphate, is not only peculiar with Hizb ut-Tahrir in this country. The concept of caliphate is well established within the literature of Islam. There are no two opinions about it in Islam. I'm not aware of any scholars, classical scholars of Islam, who deny this concept. So when we use the word caliphate, we are seen as extremists. This is exactly what I'm talking about. So when people like Tony Blair and David Cameron and others use these terms loosely, not knowing what the Muslims believe in, it is dangerous. I mean, they're giving a wrong message to the masses. So anyone looking at me or hearing me speak about caliphate would think that I am actually proposing or forwarding an extremist idea, which is not true. Caliphate, what is caliphate? This is exactly what caliphate is, what I talked about. This is the political fruit of Islam. Adam Smith talked about caliphate. Was he an extremist? No. Remove him from the 20-pound note. Put me instead.
We're coming up to the end of our session now, so just the very last few questions. Yes, sir.
No, I think I just wanted to say, and taking your point as well, I think there's responsibility in all of us to try and help this situation. I just wonder, as the lady said, if our leaders need to be educated, as you put it, and I totally accept your point, someone needs to take some proactive responsibility for doing that. I'm not sure who that should be. But I wonder how, we don't want to, I'm sorry if I offended you by using the word extremism, that's what I should have.
No, that's fine.
But there are, the EDL, again, children, people, and again, the media picks it up. No one would have known about it if the media hadn't picked it up. No one would have known about it. It's very unfortunate that's what happened. But yeah, I think it's really important that these terms are nailed down and we do understand what is the actual intention behind the words and not how the misunderstanding can happen. And that then creates the issues which we're talking about. So sorry. I've spoken too much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, brother. We'll take one more question from somebody who I haven't heard from yet today. So, yes, Sister Joy.
Thank you for the talk. Following on what everybody's been saying, can we sort of think about how we could communicate between each other so that coexistence can start to happen, as opposed to the apartheid, opposed to the capitalism, opposed to the confusion that is widespread amongst all of us, both Muslim and non-Muslim. How can we start making this better?
That's a very good point. This is where the Muslims come in. It is an obligation upon Muslims to talk about their religion with the other. They have to, as a minority in this country, speak to their neighbors, to their friends, to their work colleagues, in order to educate them about Islam in a very kind way. Quran actually asks the Muslims to do that. Udu ila sabili rabbik. Call to the way of your Lord and tell them what Islam is and give them the solutions. So if you are speaking to your friends about the statistics of rape in this country, which are very, very high, you give them a solution. You tell them Islam has a solution for that. You talk about drug abuse and alcohol related crimes. You talk to them about Islam and tell them how Islam can give a solution. And on top of that, the benefits of Islam, family cohesion. Islam brings families together. Islam brings children and parents together. Unlike what we have in the form of individualism in this country. Everyone wants to do their own thing, which is great, but neglecting people who are directly related to you. So Islam is a cohesive way of life against individualism, which we find in this country. So Muslims have to come out. The solution is, my sister, the Muslims have to come out and speak for themselves. We are, unfortunately, very, very incompetent in this regard. We have been inactive, and our passive inactivity or our passive incompetence is not to be tolerated anymore. We, the Muslims, and the brothers who are active in this field must wake the Muslims up to see the reality. And this is only happening because people misunderstand us. So unless or until we speak to the people, they won't understand us. So we have to come out and educate ourselves firstly and most importantly about our own religion, and then educate the others about this beautiful religion which has produced such a beautiful result in the past. And if someone was to use a term apartheid for separation,
separate development.
Separate development, okay. You're right, there shouldn't be a state within a state. I agree. But if people want to live as they like, I mean, I stand up for people's right to live as they please. If a people want to do things in a certain way, as long as their values are not against common human values, they should be allowed to live as they like. For example, if the Hindus want to worship their gods in their way, they should be allowed to live in that way. We have, I mean, the other day I was driving on Ealing Road in Wembley, and it is a beautiful example of convivencia in this country. We have a temple, a massive temple on Ealing Road. We have a great mosque, on that road. We have a church on that road.